really fun to be addressing Wyoming people. I have had the pleasure of giving this or similar talks to different groups, and I was mentioning when Jim told me how mortified, that wasn't an intentional pun, but Jim was mortified about having to speak at 8 o'clock this morning. I told him the last time I gave a talk similar to this, I walked into a room for the Central States region, which I didn't realize how big it was, and there were 700, alert faces waiting for me at 8 o'clock in the morning. So, but I think we did pretty well here for Wyoming. We're a large state with a few people, and this is a great turnout. So I'm very pleased, and especially to have people like Larry and Bruce drive 7 hours to hear a local Jackson architect talk. So thank you guys. And
I didn't know you were on the program.
Yeah, oh, right. Yeah, Bruce wouldn't have come, except he had other stuff he had to do. He couldn't get out of it. Now hold on a sec. I'm just going to get to the right view here, and hopefully this will all work flawlessly because we have Levi at the controls here. I want to. Obviously, the topic is biophilia, and I will try. Oh, that's nice. Just don't put people to sleep. Get your coffee, because it's that time of day. Anyway, it's about biophilia, but really I like to describe kind of the arc of our firm, how I got to Wyoming in the first place, and kind of this exciting ride that we've been on. And I think all of us are lucky to live in the state, except for those of you who are in Montana, but that's not bad. And by the way, is it MSU that we were talking about? Because we have at least 5 MSU graduates employed at Carney Perth. So you're kind of the feeder school for us. So do you know your way to Jackson? Okay, so anyway, this all started, and by the way, we do hope that you'll all come to the conference in Jackson in October. Yeah, I'm sorry, some of these slides may not show up as nice. That's actually a really beautiful image on my computer of the Wind River Mountains. It's just slightly washed out there, but the important thing is that text at the bottom. Many of you know Wallace Stegner, and who was a great writer of the West. He really understood the West and all of the challenges that faced this beautiful part of the world that we are lucky enough to live in. And he actually was a professor at Stanford when I was there, but I wasn't smart enough to take any courses from him. In any case, I've learned a lot from reading Wallace Stegner after the fact, and this is one of the quotes that I think is very motivating for me and what I did when I came to Wyoming and started a practice. The West is a native home of hope when it fully learns that cooperation, not rugged individualism, is the quality that most characterizes and preserves it. Then it has a chance to create a society to match its scenery. And I actually was crazy enough about 8 years into my living in Jackson to run for county commissioner, and that was kind of my inspiration. It's like, we need to cooperate. We need to collaborate and work together, and it has been really fun. And I think what I'm trying to explain is how our firm came to evolve as very much a firm rooted in the community and part of the community with doing a whole range of work. And Bruce and Larry can both relate to this, because I think all of our practices have strived to do that over the years. This is a photograph of a ranch that my father bought back in 1963, and I would say he was kind of in the first wave of people who realized he was a writer. Back those days you had like IBM's electric typewriters instead of computers, but he thought his typewriter was portable, and he bought a ranch on the Upper Green, and he dragged 3 teenage boys from Beverly Hills, California up to Wyoming. It's like the Beverly Hillbillies in reverse. So in any case, it was pretty exciting for these kids to all of a sudden be riding horses and branding cattle. This was an operating cattle ranch of about 2,300 acres that we expanded and finally sold it at about 16,000 acres of farm ranch and a big agrarian business that I was trying to run while juggling my architecture practice. And so after my father died, we sold the ranch, and but it made a big imprint on me, my work, my life. This again, hard to read. On the right, that says Carneyville, Wyoming, underneath the recognized standard of northern Wyoming, no soot, no clinkers. That was the kind of coal that was extracted out of the ground about 30 miles north of here on the Tongue River. And my great-grandfather, who came over from Ireland with not a penny in his pocket, ended up somehow as kind of a businessman who controlled this series of mines in Sheridan, Wyoming. And during the 20s, and it pretty much closed down during the Depression. But there was actually a town of Carneyville. And so I just wanted to make that link to those of you in Sheridan. I'm not truly a carpetbagger. My grandfather told me, I never met my great-grandfather, but my grandfather, when we bought this ranch that was in the last picture, he thought we drastically overpaid because my dad paid $15 an acre for the sage land and $85 an acre for the hay. And that was irrigated, 360 acres of irrigated hay meadow. Anyway, his father paid 15 cents an acre for this land, this beautiful land just up the road from you here. But you know, that's kind of the beginning of my introduction to Wyoming, coming out here as a teenager and you know, learning the ways of the West. Okay, so this is the topic today. Biophilia, and I wanted to say, Jim, when you asked this morning if any of us knew what biophilia meant, I mean, I had a vague idea. I raised my hand, but really, I had to go say, you know, check it out. And there's actually a really good film. If any of you want to follow this up, you can rent it for 10 bucks, I think, and buy it for 20. It's a really good film about biophilia, and it shows a lot of our architectural heroes and some of the buildings they're doing all around the world. That really meet the definition of buildings that connect people with nature. Well, whether or not you know what this term is, I feel like we've been doing this kind of work for a long time without necessarily putting that name on it. Natural light, natural spaces, prospect and refuge, you know, just that idea of how human nature wants to feel like you can see out there on the savannah to see what animals are coming either to get you or animals that you need to hunt, and then you need the refuge to know that you're safe from behind. And that, I think, the best architecture incorporates that. And I love, this is a quote that's in the movie, and I can't remember which architect, it might have been Kieran Timberlake, but you know, he said, you know, a lot of biophilia is just plain good design. I mean, it's just, you know, you're being responsive to your context. So I think it's a great topic, and fortunately for me, I was able to pick up that topic without really modifying my slideshow that I've done that really is, I call it context, culture, and landscape inspired by place. And when you live in a place like Jackson, it's pretty hard not to be inspired. And it's also kind of, the stakes are high, you don't want to screw it up. It's too beautiful. This is obviously one of the most photographed sites in Wyoming. It's the Molten Barn in front of the Tetons. You know, it's a cliche, but it totally represents all that is great about many parts of our state, and particularly Jackson Hole. And again, in these smaller slides, it's hard to see, but that's basically, on those 9 slides, it's just, here's the embarrassment of riches we have. You could go fishing, you can go to a rodeo, you can, you know, be back mountain, you know, backcountry cycling, I mean, kayaking, all these great things that we can do. And I think those are really true across the state for all of us who live and work here. These are some of the things specific to Jackson Hole. And for whatever reason, I don't know, the gateway to the national parks is a big one, but we've had kind of an outsized, you know, we kind of fight above our weight when it comes to cultural things. We've got the Grand Teton Music Festival, we have that incredible museum up the hill, and then there's the Center for the Arts, the second phase images that we designed with Stephen Dina. So Jackson is a pretty amazing place to live. We also are blessed to have a western town that actually has a square. Most western towns, Pinedale is where our ranch was. Any of you have driven through Pinedale, that's your classic. It's one street. You know, for the longest time, it was one paved route, and all the rest of the roads going north and south off that east-west main road were dirt. So Jackson has a town square. It's pretty amazing how fortunate we are. And then I also wanted to just put it on the personal basis and say, well, that was the photograph that I showed. That fish came out of a pond on our ranch, and then that's a picture of my grandson who at the time, I think he's about 3 in that picture. They live in London, and he loved to walk out and he'd say, "Can I go to the meadow?" And they didn't have meadows quite like this in London where he lives. So, but what the funny thing was relative to that fish, I can't resist telling this, is that when I caught that fish, it was about the same time Otis was born, and he weighed less than that fish when he was born. So anyway, that again, this is just sort of setting the stage for and again, I'm kind of preaching to a group that knows all about Wyoming and Jackson Hole, but one of the other big draws in Jackson has been the Mountain Resort. And I have been fortunate enough to be able to do a lot of buildings up there. That's the tram that was built about 8 years ago, and a design. We did the building, of course. The Swiss designed the tram itself. By the way, yeah, we worked with KLNA on that one. Well, we do a lot of work with KLNA. Not to leave out Martin. I'll show you a Martin project later, but KLNA has done a lot of our work, and they had a really challenging time working with the Swiss engineers who said, "No, you cannot touch our structure." Their structure holds up the tram itself. It's like, "No, do not touch." So anyway, the Mountain Resort has been a big draw, and as you all know, I think everybody's heard that this is sort of the Airstreams to Gulfstreams thing that represents the whole stretch of what we see in Jackson. And part of the reason that we're having some problems, and it was mentioned earlier, yes, housing, affordable housing, and it's kind of gotten to a crisis point. And I'm actually on the board of the Mountain Resort, and I'm very proud of the work that we do, and having developed that resort into what has been voted the #1 resort in America a couple times. And it's just it's great being part of an organization that's trying to do the right thing. But we're actually, here's you can get a pass if you will put up an employee for the summer. I mean, that's how bad it is. Or they've got another ad that talks about high school teachers who get their 3 months off. If they come work for the village, they get a free pass. So there's a lot of issues at play in Jackson that have to do with the fact that, the wealthy have discovered us. Wyoming, we know, has this favorable tax treatment throughout the state. And so wealthy people who want to avoid state taxes can come to Jackson or Wyoming in general. And that's just put some pressure on the community. And both Bruce and Larry and a lot of us have been involved, a lot of architects are involved in trying to help out. Now, okay, so that's, again, it's kind of fun to be able to have your group photo sitting out in a national park over Lake Creek, coming out of Phelps Lake, and that's our staff. And there are actually more of them now. We've added an interiors group. Just quickly, I got tired of getting kicked out of buildings when I was a tenant and as the firm was growing, and so we built this building in 2000 and have been it's been evolving over the years. We call it CLB Cold because we now also have a small office in Phoenix, CLB Hot, and then we've done some work there. It's not really a big office. It's more just a support for our Jackson office. It's hard to hire and keep employees with all the housing and the issues we've talked about. And then we're about to open an office in Bozeman. So that should be interesting. There's an old mill that's being converted, and we're about to sign that lease as we expand, and we'll send 1 or 2 people up there. I just wanted to give a little background on kind of how I got to Wyoming and why it was such a complete anomaly, really, in my career. I went to graduate school at the Harvard GSD, and the first thing we did was to go out here to Gropius's house. Walter, of course, had died, and I went to school. I'm a lot older than most of the people in this room. Bruce, you're accepted, but
don't forget it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so this was 1973, and so Mrs. Gropius was alive, and she greeted us, and we all went and kissed the ring, so to speak. And I remember looking at that house and going, it's really cool, but you couldn't pay me enough to live here. And it's a beautiful setting in Lincoln, Mass. But it was kind of cold and very modern. But and I had grown up in Beverly Hills, California, as I said, and less. I didn't live in a mid-century modern house. In any case, after Harvard, I remember, and we were completely inculcated in the whole you know, Le Corbusier and the Bauhaus, and you know, there was, I remember when somebody actually drew, actually I did one scheme where I drew kind of a shed roof building, and it was like, what's that? You know, people looked at it, it's like, that, we don't do those at Harvard, you know, because it was very Bauhaus, and our inspirations were just very different. And I remember reading this book. Does anybody know of this book? Tom Wolfe, the famous writer, Electric Kool-Aid, Acid Test, a number of other great books. He decided to take on architecture and just made an argument to say, all this modern stuff, you know, that you see everywhere, you know, it's kind of overrated because people don't really live this way. People don't live where if you put something on the floor, it's like, oh my God, you've ruined my perfect, simple composition. And anyway, that was kind of like an eye-opener for me. And then I went to Denver after school, and one of the big jobs we got was designing the Fort Wilderness Lodge and Resort in Orlando. And again, pardon the hard-to-read slides, but the basic idea here is just that all of a sudden we're thrust into doing a huge fake log building, because by the way, it's all type 1. You can't do those logs, and you were pointing that out, Cornelius, and in the other place. And of course Disney is the king of pastiche, but we did kind of Old Faithful on steroids. We won a competition against the Dean of Yale, who was Tom Beebe at the time. And it's a pretty amazing project. If you guys ever go, I think it's one of the most hotels in at Disney now. So I'll just give you the background. So now in 1992, I end up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I haven't really done a lot of residential work, but for Disney, they actually paid us to go around and study every great Western lodge. So we went with the Disney food and beverage guys. So, you know, when we'd show up at the Iwani in California, one of the most beautiful Gilbert Stanley Underwood buildings, and we go into the dining room, and the food and beverage guy orders one of everything. You know, so it was an amazing experience. And then we did the same at Yellowstone and all around the West. So that was a great training for me. But really, I'd never done a log building before. It's like, okay, how am I going to do that? And so here we are at the kind of gateway to both Grand Teton and Yellowstone. And this is a sketch that I did years ago, just sort of saying, oh, this is kind of the environment we're in. You know, we got the mountains, there's forest, we've got many rivers, but the Snake is our main river running through the valley, and other wonderful creeks. There's the plain, there are the buttes, the wonderful elements that somehow didn't get ground down in the, when this was all a seabed. And then there's the town and the settlement. And the other challenge that we had is, you know, since I had gone to Harvard, I had this very kind of high-minded attitude about what architects can do, and not just kind of from the formal side, but as part of your community and kind of leading the way forward. So I was thinking, well, how am I going to get beyond just doing, you know, kind of pastiche log buildings? And so this was kind of a diagram I drew that I think we can all relate to this. There's sort of memory is on the left side, where that's everything in the past, nostalgia, you know, stuff that we loved, all those great ranch buildings that I saw as a kid and that I loved. And then you have prophecy. It's like, moving forward, where are we going to go? What do we want to be? You know, does Jackson and then our work in Wyoming want to look like everything was built in the 30s by the Forest Service or by the Park Service? And, you know, the sort of parkitecture, which the Disney project was. And then, so there's sort of, on that side is the idea-driven part, where you're just saying, how can we be more abstract? How can we sort of push the vocabulary of what's acceptable in the West? And, Jackson's been kind of a fun place to do that, because, again, there are a lot of forces that would just like to, cover Jackson in amber and just leave it the way it is. You know, this funky little boardwalks into town square and all that great stuff that we love. But of course, the first job I got in Jackson was to do exactly that, a big log lodge for a Hollywood attorney who actually was Jeff Katzenberg's attorney. We'd just been working with Disney. So anyway, this was a fun house done before Jackson enforced some reductions in size. You can only build an 8,000-foot house now in Jackson, 10,000 feet, including non-habitable. So 8 habitable, 10,000 total. This is about 14,000 feet, and those are just my first sketches. And I actually was doing this design while I still lived in Denver before moving up. I may have not made that clear that I was in Denver when I worked at urban design group and did the hotel for Disney. So now we're in Jackson. The second job I got was St. John's Church. There was an existing church on the lower right, beautiful chapel, and everybody was totally nervous about being able to build something bigger that could seat 250 people as opposed to the like 75 people who could fit there. And so anyway, we did a master plan and did a building that's still, I'm still most proud, or this is one of my favorite buildings in Jackson. I'm not sure how many of you have to deal with design guidelines in the various projects that you do. I mean, a lot of times if you're doing public work, you have all the usual zoning, but I mean, in these subdivisions, the owner is a pretty savvy guy, but he definitely favors old style stuff. And so, you know, and we're now, Larry, how long, like 10 years? Has it been that long that since the first house? And maybe it's 8 years, but there's been a lot of building, and at first, well, John let one kind of more modern house get through, done by Steve Dina, and he really didn't like it. So then he starts rewriting the design guidelines so that doesn't happen again. And I used to like to joke that Steve's building, because it was these big wide forms and very simple shapes, I said, Steve, those look like the box that the other houses came in. So, you know, and it actually was, he left some of it unstayed. Yeah, that's really neat. But Steve's a good friend, so, and he didn't come. You know, if you were here, you know. But anyway.
That's the reason Steve's not here.
Yeah, that's right. So, see, I mean, Bruce makes it sound like, you know. Anyway, it's just, and I'm sorry, that is the most dramatic photograph, but it's really dark, so I'm going to show. Why did I do all these nighttime shots? They're really hard to see. Anyway, that's inside this house, but even though you can't see it that well, what we've focused on is the houses all, you know, at Shooting Star, they have to have roofs that look like this. You know, they're gable roofs. If you do a gable roof, you can try to, you know, have thin edge and big overhangs and make it look pretty cool, but it's still a gable roof. And so we try to push the envelope on these things, and Larry's the gatekeeper along with the rest of his team, but have been very supportive. There's another architect, and typically the architects are more liberal, and then the sort of paid guy for the resort is looking through the you know, flipping his pages through the book, going, well, your overhang has to be 2 feet, and yours is only 1 foot. It's like, okay. Larry, can we do that? So it's pretty cool interior. This is a Swedish couple who've now relocated to Jackson. And you know, it's kind of a mixture of old wood, but a more modern interior. And lots of glass. You know, we're seeing with the improvements in windows and you know, all these great window companies that didn't exist when I first started practicing in Jackson. At least they didn't make thermally broken steel windows. And even ones like these are Albertini, the Italian company. But yeah, they've. But you can see the traditional form, but it's definitely sort of at the boundary of being less traditional, but still respecting those design guidelines. Okay, so here's one that this is one of those projects you don't get too often. An existing house, maxed out on their FAR, so they built their 8,000 feet, couldn't build another foot above grade. And this guy wanted a major wine cellar. We said, well, how major? 7,000 bottles. I mean, that's a big wine cellar. And so we did the program. It's, you know, like 3,500 feet. It's a couple thousand feet of wine room. And then he wanted to have some kind of area outside the cooler wine room that he could entertain in. There's the water. I think the Sound of Water, we all know that is very biophilic. And, but this ended up being a $4.5 million wine cellar. I mean, that's bigger than even some of our, you know, fancy houses that we do. Here's the plan, it's all buried. So it was a little like, you know, when this was under construction, it did look like one of those urban projects that Todd gets to do, you know, where there's shoring and it's going down 30 feet into the ground. And so obviously very expensive to build. And you can see number 2 is the little front living room area. And then there's the wine. And there's a section in the hill. We sort of thought of it as like if you took a wine barrel and just unwound it, in terms of the materiality and the ceiling. This is all made by Spearhead Timberworks, that's a great group that we work with out of British Columbia. And then here's a picture of it under construction, but that's the sort of the unfurled wine barrel, and then it just, you know, absolutely beautiful clear mahogany, and then there's a valse stone on the floors, which is the same stone used in that wonderful Peter Zumthor project at Valse. You know, why pay less, as we say over in Jackson? And there's the cleft, there's the honed, I mean, you know, various forms of the stone, and that's a view back into the wine cellar. And then I couldn't resist when I went there. I said, what kind of wines is this guy drinking? And I mean, you know, this is like pretty nice stuff. So he hasn't invited me over anyway to have wine with him. I'm waiting for that invitation. So again, this is really a basement room, but you don't know it by the time we open it all up, and there it is the way it sits on the hillside. This is in Granite Ridge, it's on the slope on the Tiwanaut lift. And then we have, you know, a few things we're working on. I think architects, we all love our most recent projects, right? And that's a really nice house being built in John Dodge for a new resident who left San Francisco. Here's one that, if you could see it better, it might be clear. It's kind of, it actually has flat roofs. So I feel like I've gone all the way around from, you know, back to Gropius's house and doing this roof. Of course, it has a little pitch on top, but it's a hillside house for some clients that are, you know, want this to be their final resting place, and so it's all handicapped accessible. We're going to put an elevator in it, and it's pretty cool. We were talking about mid-century modern earlier, and there's definitely a little bit of that feel to that. This is a case where a client who we've done their main house, and they wanted to do a guest house with a really nice fitness area in it, and a guest room, and a big garage for Tom, who's an attorney in Hollywood, and Judy, who was also a Hollywood agent, and they are spending a lot more time here, but they love the gambrel roof form of a barn, and there was no way I was going to get them around that. And the house that I designed 20 years ago for them is also log. It was back in that early stage where everything was log, and so we ended up doing this gambrel roof, but we totally opened the end up, so when you come in from the front, it just looks like a barn, and then you come out and you get that view of the Tetons there, which is really pretty cool. This is another client that, you know, when you've been doing it as long as we have in Jackson, you have these clients like Ray Thurston, who we built probably 6 projects for, and the first one was totally log rustic building, and every successive project there was a kind of an exercise office for him that got a little more modern. Then he had us build a wine silo, which is this black and steel cylinder. I should have put more of the context pictures, but the point I'm making is that Ray and Amy, now their kids are growing up, and they want to move into this little pavilion on their 200-acre property, and this is basically pretty much of an all-glass pavilion with a big overhanging roof. And then because it's so much glass, you then have to say, well, how are we going to mitigate the effects of all this glass, especially when architects hate putting curtains or drapes or, you know, roller shades even. And so, and they will have some of that, and it'll all be buried so you don't see it. But in this case, and I don't know where this came, Eric, my partner Eric, is working on this with one of our new, young, super smart kids. And somehow they came up with the idea of doing these steel screens that are cut out, and they started as kind of interpretations of aspen. It was just like, yeah, everybody does that, you know. So what else can we do? And they got onto this whole idea of kind of the Voronoi diagrams that are named after some, you know, mathematician, and it's a beautiful pattern that is really it's akin to biomimicry in that it actually mimics shapes that are in nature, and they use Voronoi diagrams to study bone patterns and forestry, you know, the distribution of forests. It's used for a lot of stuff, and it's just a device. It makes a really cool screen that looks very random, and it's all cut out with, you know, our beautiful steel, you know, machines that we have now. So it's just, how do you deal with these areas of glass in an intelligent way? And here's another project that we're working on that also takes advantage of some kind of screens to help mitigate the sun. And that's an interior view. And again, everybody is going away from darker interiors. There's a lot more glass. People certainly like living pretty open, in open spaces in Jackson. These are not always, but I'd say half of our stuff are second family houses and half of them are people who live here. This is another one, Larry, do you recognize this one? This is the Palmer House where we had to get a variance at Shooting Star. Again, very traditional, but it didn't have overhangs. We just like the idea, if it's a stone building, you don't need to protect the walls with the overhangs because it's, you know, I think it's a Chief Cliff Montana stone that we like. And so we had no overhangs on this. This is a $10 million house for a guy who's gonna probably spend, you know, a month, a year here. But these are fun projects for us. And we do actually have started to get into doing some hardware. We have something called the Lift series that's manufactured by Sun Valley Bronze. So if you have, you know, that kind of client who wants to spend lots of money, it's pretty expensive, as a lot of the Sun Valley Bronze stuff is, and but it's nice stuff. And my partner Eric has totally gotten into this. And I spent some time with Tom Kundig on a trip to see Bromball Windows in Italy, and I was saying, Tom, we're coming after you here, you know, because he's got a whole hardware series now, and I think Peter Boland has one. So anyway, we're going to give Tom a run for his money here. And then the other thing that we've tried to do that has partly contributed to some of our growth is really having an interiors team within the office. And I don't know why, but they're all female. But that's actually, we have added a guy. You know, we can't. But we do like to have diversity in our office, and we do in through the entire practice. But this is our group, and they are really talented, and we're finding that interiors is a great service to offer. Some of our clients have had bad experiences with interior designers. Some don't ever want to deal with an interior designer. We even took another step, and we teamed up with Studio Como, which is a group out of Denver, and I'll show you a slide in a minute. They carry a lot of really good Italian and other lines, and we gave them some space in my office building, which I own, and but where our office is housed, and some space came available, and so we have a showroom now. Those are Alex Katz's prints that are from a local gallery, and so the showroom's been very effective, and we even bring, you know, people who aren't our clients come in and look at some of the furniture, and these are just a couple of different angles. We also have 4 people down there because we've kind of starting to outgrow our space. And then this is Studio Como, great group out of Denver. They're going to open the office in Bozeman with us too, and so we'll have a little Studio Como studio and our studio, and they carry all those great lines. So that's been a fun thing. I've always dreamed about having an interiors group. It's, you know, we compete with, I mean, I don't know if you guys see it in your various communities, but, you know, you have some showroom and they're designers, and boy, some of the stuff they come up with, it's just, you know, it doesn't enhance our building. So we like to, of course, we're control freaks, right? So we want to control, you know, the whole project all the way through, and we're seeing some success with that. This is I'm bringing it to a close here, and I think we're still in good time. A long time ago, Dwell came out with this magazine there, America Goes Modern, and they had an article that showed a map of the United States, and it showed all these pins at where cool stuff was happening in design. There was no pin in Wyoming. So my partner Eric, who is not that outspoken, you know, Eric likes to focus on design, and, you know, he actually wrote a letter to Dwell, and he just said, we need a pin. You need to look at Jackson Hole because we're doing some cool stuff here, and we need a pin. So when was this? This was, you can probably see the date on there, October, November 2005, and then in 2006, it only took a year, we got our pin. So they came and they did a really nice article on Jackson, Wyoming, and talked about all the cool projects that were happening there. And I think the point I'm trying to make here is that it really, I mean, good design can help our community so much. I mean, look at this place here. I mean, you know, there had to be 200 people here last night enjoying the dining room, this beautiful place. And, you know, I know a lot of people talk about, well, we're changing the West. Well, people love being here. People will continue to come to Wyoming. And I just think we have an opportunity to really push the best possible design we can. And that's kind of the challenge, I think, that all of us face, you know, when you know, there are limited budgets, and, you know, in Wyoming now, we really have to deal with this whole reality that, that coal production is going down. And I think if I can quote you right, you told me that there were $220 million of projects budgeted in the school districts around the state, and the latest thing came out, it was like 22 million. So that is a reduction of 90%. So, Dale had been looking at, all of you who work on schools, it's just, they're not gonna be as many. And so, what are we gonna do? We're trying to do this CWC campus in Jackson. It's just hard to get money. So anyway, I think we have to challenge ourselves to do great design that I think we all know it actually is good for the economics, good quality projects. And so this is kind of my closing bit from T.S. Eliot. And this is up on North Grovont Butte, which overlooks, you're looking basically over this beautiful Anthony Gormley sculpture over the valley. This is about 400 feet up, and that's my kind of, again, when I kind of think, well, what am I doing here, And we're always learning. But there's also kind of a circular feeling to it, like I've been here before. It's another election year. We got all this stuff going on. So I think that the exploration is a lot of what we're about, and I think if we keep challenging ourselves, as I try to do, to be exploring, then you get, this T.S. Eliot quote makes a lot of sense. So we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. So I think we're trying to all get to know our place, to get to know the people in our place and the whole context, and onward and upward for all of us. Thank you.